Welcome to Season 4 of Writing Black Joy, a virtual space that celebrates, centers, and promotes the voices of Black storytellers with joyful and uplifting stories. Here, you'll find conversations with some of my favorite Black creatives, learn more about their projects and the joy they're bringing into the world, hear more about their creative processes, and find inspiration for your own creative projects. I am Sophia Robinson, and I am a story listener, an author, and a creative. I'm honoured to bring you these conversations that get to the heart of the Black joy that these creatives are writing on history's pages. So hit subscribe and settle in as we go to today's guest. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me for this mini season of Writing Your Inner World. I've had some wonderful feedback about the previous guests. So if this is the first time you are joining us this season, go back and have a listen to some of the previous guests. We are talking all about writing your inner world. We've talked quite a bit about journaling, different types of journaling. Today, we're going to be talking about something slightly different with my guest, the fabulous Ayesis Clay. Now, I've had Ayesis on the podcast before, and I'm going to drop a link to her episode in the show notes. Ayesis is, among other things, an extraordinary playwright, poet, and theatre professional, as well as an educator and the founder of Sculpted Clay Productions, where she uses innovative theatre-infused residencies and professional development workshops to help schools create trauma-sensitive, social-emotional focused learning environments for teachers and students. In the course of Ayesis's work with educators, she runs a program that is called Write to Create. And during that program, she does a lot of use of memoirs to help the educators that she works with connect with their own inner selves. And that's a lot of what we talk about today. But of course, Ayesis has her own journal, her book of dopeness, which we talk about, and other things we talk about include using memoir to connect to your inner world, and as well as performing and how that has impacted Ayesis's view of memoir, her definition of memoir, and the different ways of writing your story and the moments from your life, how Ayesis's memoir turned into a solo show, her book of dopeness, as I said, and how it helped with imposter syndrome, the importance of taking time for yourself, going from writing something personal for yourself to writing and sharing with others, the importance of mindfulness when she takes people through the process of writing memoir, using rituals and other forms of creativity, such as doodling, to get into your writing practice, and so much more. How Ayesis describes memoir differs a bit from journaling, and you'll hear her talking about that. And I think this is a great addition to this series on writing your inner world, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. Before we go to our guests, just a reminder for you to click subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Share this episode with a friend. Just send them the link www.writingblackjoy.com and they can find their podcast player over on the page. And if you are on Apple, I'd love it if you could leave me a rating or a review. I would really appreciate it. All right. I hope you enjoy today's conversation as much as I do. Hey everyone, welcome back to Writing Black Joy. This season is all about connecting to your inner world through writing, and I've got one of my favorite returning guests, and this is Ayesis Clay, Sculpted Clay Productions, and we are talking about memoir.
Yes.
Talking about memoir. So welcome back, Ayesis. So glad to have you.
Yes. Thank you for having me back. Our talk during the first season was really great. I had a good time. So I'm so happy that you brought me back.
I am really happy as well. As I said, we're going to talk a bit about memoir. I'd love for you to define memoir for me, because I think people have different ideas about what memoir is when it comes to memoir. So if you could just tell us what you mean when you say memoir, how would you define it?
Absolutely. Memoir is just the act of writing your life. Moments, big moments, small moments. I like to think of it as larger journaling, if you think about it like that, right? So where you are writing down the things that have happened to you, the people that you've met, the stories that of your life and the things that you've learned along the way.
I love
And
that.
so that can be in many different forms. When we normally think of memoir, we think of books, right? You're writing a long, your memoir, the story of your life. However, you can write a series of poems that can be memoirs. You can write a solo show, which is what I did, as a way of preserving memories in memoir form. So
That's great. And you talked about almost it being like a larger form of journaling, but I always think of memoir as something that's written to share as opposed to journaling, which a lot of people kind of, write personally for themselves. So does it have to be shared? Do you think
no.
a memoir?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, but absolutely no. I don't think so. So the work that I do with educators is around writing memoirs as a means of creative reflection. They can share it if they like. Of course, you can share it if you like, but it's really about looking at the journey and really honing in on the lessons I've learned, or looking at the past versions of yourself to see how far you've come. So it's not necessarily about teaching someone else a lesson or, through your story, which of course it absolutely can be. But really it's about that creative reflection piece for me, for you, for the writer to really go inside, deep inside and look at what they've been through from a bird's eye view. I talk a lot about writing from inside of it versus on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
And journaling a lot of times is writing from inside of it.
Yeah.
It's like you're doing that. You are writing it real time, or close to real time, how you're feeling right now. Memoir writing is about having a little bit of distance and looking at your path and your journey through fresh eyes.
Yeah, no, I love that. I obviously, if you want a longer version of Ayesis's sort of like experience with her own memoir writing, please go back and listen to that episode, which I'm going to drop in the show notes. But can you just give us a little piece of your own sort of experience of writing the memoir for your solo show? Or I don't think you wrote it for the solo show, so tell us all about it.
Absolutely, I did not. So for those who don't know, I'm an educator. I've been an educator for many, many years, but I started, and I still am, as a theater performer, as an actor, as a director. And my journey in education led me down some pretty dark paths, dealing with burnout at one point, dealing with compassion fatigue at another point, dealing with vicarious trauma at yet another point. And it was after the loss of one of my students. I've unfortunately lost several. The last student, when I was in the classroom, losing him, I feel like I broke. And so my therapist at the time suggested that I write, that I use my art as a way to kind of connect. And at the time, it was more of a journaling exercise. And what came out was almost like an apology letter to my students, because I left the classroom and I felt like I had abandoned them. And so in writing that letter to them during that time, again, like I said, I had just left the classroom, and a good friend of mine had a theater company, and she was like, "Well, what are you going to do now?" And I'm like, I don't know. And so she was like, "I have this opportunity for you." And I was like, "I don't have anything written." She was like, "It's okay. It'll work out." And it ended up being a solo show, a solo opportunity at the Kennedy Center here in Washington, D.C. in the States. And I looked at the letter that I wrote, and I was like, this is what I want to craft. This is the journey that I want to take. And that started the journey with the solo show of writing about that journey as a teacher. Now, of course, it's kind of morphed over the years, because with distance, there's a little bit more clarity. And so it's now most certainly a memoir of my time there. And so I travel the United States and abroad if needed, um, performing this solo show for educators and for community members. So just kind of, it's a play.
I love it. I love it. But I'm curious, tell me, because as you said, you wrote it sort of at first to kind of process how your own emotions, and then you decided to turn it into this solo show. Let's start with the actual writing of it. Do you usually use writing to process? Are you a journaler? Are you somebody who's always found that helpful?
Yeah. As a teenager is when I kind of fell into writing. I've always been an avid reader, but as a teenager, I fell into writing poems and using poetry to really kind of express what I was feeling right now, try to get out the emotions that I didn't really have the words for at the time. So it started back then, or I didn't have the name for what I was feeling at the time, so I would just write. But now I'm finding that as an adult, writing most certainly is one of the things that has kept me sane and has helped me to really understand not only my processes, but the world around me in a more concrete way. So yeah, I journal. I do journal. I have a journal where for a good portion of my life, I dealt with imposter syndrome and feeling like I wasn't good enough. And until, a series of events happened. And so I realized that I needed to rely on me, my words, my affirmations, rather than seeking it for someone else. And so in this journal, I write about my book of dopeness, how all the ways that I think that I'm dope, all the dope things that I do, tiny and large, so that I don't seek external validation all the time for things that I do. So
yeah, so I'm gonna put a link to the book of dopeness. You can get it on Amazon. I got a copy. I love it. I like that. So you have a journal, you do journal, and then of course you've written memoir for yourself. And I know that's a process that you take that's a process that you take others through. Tell us, I feel like I'm jumping all over the place, but it'll be fine. Tell us a little bit about, how did it impact you in such a way that you felt like it would be something to take others through?
Oh my goodness, this is an excellent question. So, with the solo show, I had written it, I had performed it at the Kennedy Center, and then I was accepted into this retreat type situation, this residency, where for a whole week you get support on building up your piece, your performance piece. It was for solo Black women solo performers. And so they took us to northern New York, right on the edge of this beautiful Lake Seneca, and gave us a week to really dive into and get all the support that we needed around improving the show. Mm-hmm. And it was during that time, and it started then, when I realized that it was the first time that I had space and time to think about me, only me. My husband wasn't there. My children weren't there. I didn't have students to think about. Literally that whole week was just focused. Everything was focused on me and this piece of work, this piece of art. Mm-hmm. And that was where I really began the healing journey. And that's when the show kind of morphed. And I realized, like, wow, if other educators had this time to really just focus on them solely, nothing else, and look at their journey and look at the patterns over the years, in hopes to either change those patterns or to dive deeper into those more intentionally. I was like, what an amazing gift that would be. Fast forward, about a year, I think it was about a year after that, I had the pleasure to perform the show in front of an audience of mostly educators. It wasn't supposed to be that way. It was just a lot of my former colleagues and had told their friends, and there was just a bunch of teachers in the audience. And so they saw the show. And then afterwards, it was tears. And then in mass, almost, they came up to me and they're like, I feel like you were telling my story. Like, I related so much to what you were saying, and it hit me that I'm dealing with these things and I haven't healed from these things. I haven't healed from the loss of a student. I haven't healed from, the burnout that I'm feeling. And I feel like I need to leave education. I don't want to, but I feel like I need to. And so I realized at that point right then that I needed to do something, that it couldn't just be wouldn't it be nice if teachers had this space? It had to be something created and something created from the position of someone who's been there. And in a lot of ways, was still there. And so that was where Right to Create was born. The Right to Create, as well as Reignite the Educator, which is the professional development where I go into schools for that. But the actual Right to Create program was born there.
I love that. I definitely like what you said about the space to just think about yourself. I mean, most of my listeners know I was in healthcare for like a couple of decades. Now I am also in education, healthcare education, and there's always somebody else to think about. There's always a student or a colleague or some larger thing to think about. And so I love the idea of creating a space where it's like, this is for you, to just be able to reflect and have your own space.
And to speak on that for just a quick second, we are almost trained to think that thinking of us is selfish and wrong. Taking time to like really focus on ourselves is wrong, especially in education or healthcare. It's like, no, because we're givers, and we give, but we can't give if we don't have anything to give.
Yeah, totally agree with. So one thing I wonder about, because earlier we talked about journaling as being something that's really for yourself, and memoir potentially being something that you share with others. Of course, you did the ultimate share because you then turned it into a show that you performed. Obviously, that's your craft, your gift. But I'm curious, what I want to know is, obviously you wrote it first as a letter to your students, and then you said it kind of morphed into this solo show. What was that process like, of going from something that was just for you, just to kind of help you process, to something that was for others?
Yeah. I'm so glad. Thank you for asking this question, because this is something that I still struggle. So, my solo show showcases some very painful moments in my teaching career, some very personal moments. My battle with depression, my battle at one point with suicide ideation. It really goes deep. And so the journey from this personal, even before the letter, these personal kind of journal entries that changed to, okay, I'm so sorry I wasn't strong enough, which this is kind of the tone that the letter took. I'm so sorry I wasn't strong enough to stay, and to looking at it from the bird's eye view of kind of where I am now. It took a long time. It took therapy. It took sitting by myself and looking at what was the point. What was the lesson? What did I get out of this? And not even just what did I get out of this, but what can someone else get out of this? Like, when I talk about sharing memoirs from on top of it, sharing it, we never want to trauma dump on people, right? Never want to trauma dump on people. So it's always has to be this is where I was, and this is where I am. And you can also, this is the path that I took, that you could also kind of take this path. So I had to look at it like that. What can someone else take from my story, and how can my story influence and help another educator who's feeling the same way? I just performed it for a district in Ohio and here in the States. And the district leader asked me, she was like, "Are you okay?" afterwards. And I was like, "Yes, I'm okay." She was like, "That was very, whew." And I was like, "Yes." And I have to process every time, because I'm reliving it. It's not like a book of poetry that it lives off on its own. I'm literally reliving these things. And I have a moment, this is actually off of your question, but I have a moment at the end of my solo show where I pay homage to my students. And that always grounds me back. That always brings me back. Like, this is why, because I want to make sure that every educator that's looking at this in front of me can be strong enough for their unicorns. I call my former students my unicorns. They can be well for themselves so that they can be rock stars for their unicorns. And so it always grounds me and brings me back.
I love that. And I think that's such a good point, because, you know, I'm a writer, right? And I I'll write a book or I'll write a blog post or whatever. And then it's written. I may revisit it or whatever, but like, it's, you know, you edit it, you kind of write it, and you end up with this thing that is complete. I think it continues to be complete the first time someone purchases it or 100th time someone purchases it. But for you, like, performing it is, as you said, reliving it, and almost like, it's not like you can just write it and be like, okay, I've got it out now, and okay, whew.
Yeah.
Actually, and you know, and of course with acting, you kind of have to be in that headspace. You can't, not specifically in it, but like, you can't kind of like hold it at a distance. So I find that really amazing. I'm kind of wondering, because, you know, we'll talk about this before we go. You, as you said, you are running another cohort of your Right to Create program that you run. So what, you know, I know you would take people through loads of steps when it comes to writing memoir, but if somebody was right at the jumping off point, what's like the first thing that you have people do?
The very first thing I have them do is mindful moments. And we go through, and I know this is not necessarily about the writing, but it's important. Because what happens, I'm finding with a lot of people in this process, is they sit down to write. Well, two things. They get very intimidated by the blank page. Like, what am I supposed to write? I don't know. Or they start writing, and then hamster wheel mind kicks in, and they start thinking about all the other things that they have to do. And, you know, they're not present with the work. So the very first thing we do is ground ourselves in the present with mindfulness. I have, you know, we go through a whole mindfulness practice inside of Right to Create. The second thing is I give them, we go through a series of prompts. So it can be very difficult for some people to just say, okay, I'm going to write my story. We have a million stories in our lives. And so we get down to the nitty gritty of like, what do you want to say? Or what do you want to explore? What's important to you right now? And so the series of prompts kind of take us through that.
And I do think that mindfulness is important. And I think we do it in sort of different ways. I always, something that I will probably write more about, but it's something that I think a lot about is rituals, and, you know, just having some way of bringing you into the space that you're in right now and removing the other things that are going on. I think that is a part of the writing, as much as thinking is part of writing, as much as conversations. Like, you know, to me, writing is not just the actual pen and paper piece of thing, but it's like it's it's that creative process, and a part of that creative process is, what story am I going to write? Let me, thinking about it, trying to sort of like, I do some developmental work with clients, and sometimes it's like I almost think of it as like a thing that you pick up and you're turning around. Like, let me just turn this thing around and see what angle I'm going to look at it from, and whatever, that type of thing. And I think that's a part of the process as well. So I like that sort of starting off by just clearing things out. And I like, if something that, as I said, maybe I'll write about at some point, is creating your own rituals so that you can get yourself into that space. Because I think it's, obviously, if you're an educator, take Ayesis's program, but if you're just starting out in writing memoir, sometimes it's nice to have a way to just almost like to end off whatever you're doing before and like step into this writing space or this writing portal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of the work that I do is not just around writing, but using the creative process to kind of springboard ideas. And so I've found that a process, it's called Zentangling. I call it mindful doodling because I don't necessarily follow the steps of Zentangle. But mindful doodling to kind of center the mind while you create and draw helps to start that process. So it kind of eases you into it. It's like the change from drawing to writing, from hamster wheel mind to a place of solace.
Yeah,
all leads into a good practice. But it's so important to find your own ritual. And so, yeah,
I love that. So I have got two more questions for you. One is about your this is the sort of the acting side of you, that directing, that sort of real creative side, on that side of the table. How did creating and crafting this memoir affect you as an actor, as a producer, director, all the things that you do within that world? How do you find that enhanced? Like, how did that impact your that creative side of you?
Yeah. So you asked such great questions. It's a great question. So one of the things that I'm finding, and this solo show is the gift that keeps on giving. I feel like it really is, because what I'm finding now, with more distance from writing it, what I'm finding is that I'm able to get into character more. So inside of the solo show, I not only play myself, but I play two students, and at different points in my career. And I look back at videos from the beginning and how I portrayed them, and I look at videos now, and it's a growth. And so I attribute that, obviously, one, because I'm still learning as an actor, but also two, that distance, being right after I wrote it, it was painful to step into their shoes. At least one of them, it was kind of painful. But now I'm able to look at it as an actor in a lot of ways, and like, okay, physically, how is this done? Vocally, how can I change myself? So I feel like I've grown as an actress through this process. As a producer, I have definitely grown, because it's self-produced for the most part. And I say for the most part because, with the exception of one performance, it's all been self-produced. So learning how to do that, learning how to tour your own piece, learning how to book your own piece, learning, all those things. I offer a workshop for college students now on creating your own work and producing your own work and what that looks like. So that's been a journey that I didn't know I'd ever be on. But yeah.
Love that. And I almost a couple of seasons ago, I interviewed Lady Cara Bolton, who is was in the middle of doing a documentary about learning to swim and mapping sunken slave ships. I'm also going to drop that link in here because it's so cool. But one of the things she and I discussed was like stepping out of that almost like direct, because you're directing yourself, right? So like stepping from one role to another. I mean, it's different for her because she's filming. So it's like chunks. Whereas you're like, once you get on stage, that's it. You're like, you've taken on another role. But how do you, this is just for my own curiosity, how do you find it changing, not just from the role as an actor from like one person to another, but like from the director or the producer role into the actor role? How does that, just out of curiosity, how does that work?
Yeah. So in the first iterations of it, I had a director. I've had two different directors, and they poured so much into it. So I was able in the early stages of this to not have to wear all the hats, they were the first audience and they could tell me what resonated and what didn't resonate. And, which is super important. Now, having performed it for many times, I can't remember how many times since the last director, I don't necessarily think I directed it anymore, which is odd. Thank you for the reminder that I need to bring somebody back in.
That was not my intention, but okay.
But thank you. I need that. But as jumping from producer to actress is the biggest thing that I work with now. And it can be jarring, but we just talked about one of the things that I use is ritual. Is so important. Because what happens is I get to the theater, I get to the school or whatever. And there are certain things that as the producer that I need to do. There's certain things that I need to set up, conversations I need to have with whoever booked it. But there comes a time when that hat needs to come off because in 10 minutes, in 15 minutes, I'm going to be stepping into the role of actress. And so, I'm very clear about that cutoff point. Everything has to be done. I like to say 15 minutes prior. So, I can do my routine and I can get into my ritual of all the things that I do. Which of course includes stretching. It includes, some mindfulness. I always reread the last moment of the play because that's one of the most hard hitting for me, to remind myself of the lines, of course, but also of the moment. And I pray.
Yeah.
And I have to say this too, because this is really important. My stepdad, he passed away a few years ago, but he made these crutches. I'm not wearing them today, but he made these earrings that look like little crutches. And, in a little box that said, for when you break your leg as an actress. And I always wear those, even if the show is in the morning and I'm only going to have them on, in transit. That's one of my rituals is to remind me that it's bigger than me and that I have the support of family behind me.
I love that. So my last question is, tell us about Right to Create. Tell us who it's for. Anything you want to tell us about Right to Create, because I absolutely, now that I'm an educator, I almost feel like I can do it. I didn't feel like I could do it before. Now I'm like, see, because let me tell you, I even though I love writing and I do writing classes and whatever, I love to just, it's like being driven when you can drive, but also you can be driven. That's nice too. So
that is very nice.
Considering it, although my educator life is only about like 18 months. I don't even know if that counts, but
it absolutely counts. Listen, if you were an educator for one day, it counts.
But tell us who Right to Create is for.
Yeah, so Right to Create is for educators of all walks. So not just for K-12, it can be educators in the higher learning space. It can be school leaders, district leaders, homeschool, even any person who can call themselves an educator is for those, and who would like to really creatively reflect on their journey in education. Not necessarily has to be written about your teaching journey. It could be about your life during a time when you were teaching. I've had several students talk about that. I had several people in the cohort write things about what their life was like. So it was almost tangential. It was like not necessarily about me as a teacher, but what my life was like during this time when I was a teacher. And so, yes, we're going to be starting our third cohort in April of this year. It's a 6-week course. It's a 6-week live course where once a week we get together and I offer the focus for the week, and you get an opportunity to share. At the end of it, we have a large sharing, and you can invite whoever you like to share a piece of your writing, because there's healing in that too. That was one of the major things that I found with this story. Journaling can absolutely be healing, but when we can tell our story from on top of it and share it, there is a healing that happens that is different. It's different. For me, it was more profound. So if you're interested in that, you can go to my website, and you'll probably have it in the notes. But sculptedclayproductions.com, and then sign up for the wait list.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Great. All right. So thank you so much, Ayesis. I can have you on every season, happily, comfortably. So I got to come up with some more ideas. I'll get back to you on that. Time though. Everyone, join me for the next episode. Thank you for joining us today. You can find out more about our guests in the notes below, and don't forget to hit subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss new episodes when they drop. And if this has inspired you to get your own writing project into the world, click on my website below and learn how you can work with me as a writing coach or an editor. Until next time, I send you big love from a small island.